On a foggy November morning in 1989, Margaret Thompson, a 34-year-old British tourist traveling alone through Europe, vanished without a trace from Brussels Central Station while waiting for her connecting train to Amsterdam, leaving behind only a mystery that would haunt Belgian authorities and her family for 4 long years. Margaret, a librarian from Manchester who had saved for 3 years to afford her dream solo trip across continental Europe, was last seen by fellow passengers sitting on a bench in the station's main waiting area at approximately 10:15 a.m., reading a paperback novel and occasionally checking her watch, as she waited for the 11:30 train that would take her to her final destination. Security cameras captured her entering the station at 9:45 a.m., carrying a distinctive red leather suitcase and wearing a navy blue coat. But the footage became mysteriously incomplete after that point, with several crucial minutes missing from the surveillance record during the exact time period when she disappeared. Where are you reading from? Share your city and country in the comments before we continue this story. Her planned itinerary, found later in her hotel room, showed that she had been methodically visiting major European cities over the past 6 weeks, documenting her journey with detailed diary entries and photographs that painted a picture of a cautious but adventurous traveler who was meticulous about her safety and travel arrangements. When Margaret failed to arrive in Amsterdam and missed her scheduled check-in at the Hotel Krasnopolski, the hotel staff contacted Belgian police, who initially treated the case as a routine missing person report, assuming she had simply changed her travel plans without notifying anyone. However, when investigators discovered that Margaret had left all her belongings, including her passport, money, and return ticket to Manchester, in her Brussels hotel room, they realized that her disappearance was far from voluntary and launched a comprehensive investigation that would consume thousands of hours and involve multiple law enforcement agencies. The case attracted significant media attention in both Britain and Belgium, with Margaret's photograph appearing in newspapers and on television broadcasts across Europe, as authorities appealed for any information about her whereabouts or the circumstances of her disappearance. Her elderly parents, Harold and Dorothy Thompson, traveled to Brussels and spent weeks searching for their daughter, working with local police and distributing flyers in multiple languages to anyone who might have seen Margaret during her final hours at the train station. 4 years later, the discovery of a forgotten suitcase in a railway storage facility would finally provide the answers that had eluded investigators and bring closure to a case that had become one of Belgium's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. The investigation into Margaret Thompson's disappearance revealed a complex web of circumstances that suggested her vanishing was neither accidental nor the result of a random crime, but rather the culmination of events that had been building throughout her European journey. Detective Inspector Claude Dubois, who led the Belgian investigation, discovered that Margaret had been keeping detailed records of her travels, including observations about people she met and places she visited, records that suggested she may have inadvertently witnessed or documented something that made her a target. Her diary entries, found in her hotel room, described encounters with various fellow travelers, including a man she identified only as Hans, who had approached her at multiple train stations across Germany and France, claiming to be a journalist writing about solo female travelers, but asking questions that made Margaret increasingly uncomfortable. The diary revealed that Margaret had become suspicious of Hans after noticing him at 3 different locations over the course of 2 weeks, behavior that she found too coincidental to be accidental, and that had prompted her to change her travel plans several times in an attempt to avoid further contact with him. Belgian police worked with German and French authorities to trace Margaret's movements through Europe, interviewing hotel staff, train conductors, and other travelers who had encountered her during her journey, gradually building a picture of a woman who had become increasingly paranoid about being followed. The investigation revealed that Margaret had been carrying a camera with which she had been documenting her travels, but the camera was missing from her belongings, leading investigators to speculate that she may have photographed something or someone that had put her in danger. Interviews with other tourists who had been traveling similar routes during the same time period revealed that several had encountered the mysterious Hans, described as a middle-aged man with a German accent who claimed to be conducting research, but whose questions seemed more focused on gathering personal information than on legitimate journalistic inquiry. The Belgian police investigation expanded to include Interpol, which had been tracking reports of missing tourists across Europe and had identified a pattern of disappearances involving solo travelers who had been approached by individuals claiming to be journalists or researchers. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Margaret's disappearance was likely connected to a larger criminal operation that was targeting vulnerable tourists, though the exact nature and purpose of this operation remained unclear until the discovery of crucial evidence 4 years later. The 4 years following Margaret Thompson's disappearance were marked by persistent efforts by her family and Belgian authorities to keep the case active, despite the lack of new leads and the gradual shift of resources to more recent investigations. Harold and Dorothy Thompson became fixtures at the British Embassy in Brussels, meeting regularly with consular officials and maintaining pressure on Belgian police to continue their search for their daughter, while also working with British media to keep Margaret's story in the public eye. The couple established a fund to support the search efforts and hired private investigators who specialized in missing persons cases, but these efforts yielded little new information beyond confirming that Margaret had indeed been systematically followed during her European journey. Detective Inspector Dubois continued to work on the case even as other priorities demanded his attention, maintaining contact with law enforcement agencies across Europe and following up on occasional tips and reported sightings that invariably led to dead ends. The case file grew to include hundreds of pages of witness statements, surveillance footage analysis, and correspondence with international law enforcement agencies. But the central mystery of what had happened to Margaret during those missing minutes at Brussels Central Station remained unsolved. Margaret's disappearance became a cautionary tale for solo travelers, with travel guides and safety organizations using her case to illustrate the importance of maintaining contact with family and being aware of potential threats while traveling alone in foreign countries. The British Foreign Office included Margaret's case in their annual reports on British citizens missing abroad, and her photograph remained posted in British consulates and embassies across Europe as part of ongoing efforts to locate her or determine her fate. Belgian railway authorities implemented new security measures at major train stations, including improved surveillance systems and increased security personnel, partly in response to the criticism they had received for the gaps in their surveillance coverage that had allowed Margaret's disappearance to go unrecorded. The case also prompted changes in how missing person reports involving foreign tourists were handled, with new protocols requiring immediate coordination between local police and international law enforcement agencies when tourists failed to appear at their scheduled destinations. Despite these efforts and improvements, Margaret's family continued to live with the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing what had happened to their daughter, clinging to hope that she might still be alive while gradually accepting that they might never learn the truth about her fate. On December 3, 1993, exactly 4 years and 13 days after Margaret Thompson's disappearance, railway maintenance workers cleaning out a long-forgotten storage room beneath Brussels Central Station made a discovery that would finally solve one of Belgium's most puzzling missing person cases. The workers, employed by the Belgian National Railway Company, were clearing out the storage facility to make room for new equipment when they found a red leather suitcase that had been sitting unopened in a corner of the room, covered in dust and apparently forgotten for years. When they opened the suitcase to determine its ownership before disposing of it, they found it contained Margaret Thompson's personal belongings, including her camera, additional clothing, and most significantly, a collection of documents and photographs that revealed the true circumstances of her disappearance. The camera contained a roll of film that, when developed, showed photographs Margaret had taken during her final days in Brussels, including several images of the mysterious Hans who had been following her, pictures that clearly showed his face and provided investigators with their first concrete evidence about her stalker's identity. Among the documents in the suitcase was a letter Margaret had written but never sent, addressed to her parents, in which she described her growing fear about being followed and her decision to leave some of her belongings in a station locker as a precaution in case something happened to her. The letter revealed that Margaret had discovered Hans was not a journalist but was connected to a criminal organization that was targeting solo female travelers for human trafficking, information she had obtained from another tourist who had escaped from the same group and had warned Margaret about the danger she was in. The suitcase also contained a detailed map of Brussels, with locations marked where Margaret had noticed surveillance, as well as copies of train schedules and hotel registrations that showed she had been trying to establish a pattern that would help her evade her pursuers. Most importantly, the suitcase contained a small notebook in which Margaret had recorded license plate numbers, physical descriptions, and other details about the people who had been following her, information that would prove crucial to the investigation that followed. The discovery of the suitcase immediately prompted Belgian police to reopen Margaret's case with renewed urgency, as the evidence it contained not only explained her disappearance, but also provided leads that could help them identify and prosecute those responsible for what had clearly been a carefully planned abduction. The evidence found in Margaret Thompson's hidden suitcase led to a breakthrough investigation that exposed an international human trafficking network operating across Europe, with Margaret's case serving as the key that unlocked a criminal conspiracy that had been responsible for the disappearances of dozens of tourists over several years. Belgian police used the photographs and descriptions Margaret had compiled to identify Hans as Heinrich Müller, a German citizen with a lengthy criminal record who had been working as a recruiter for a trafficking organization that specialized in targeting vulnerable tourists, particularly young women traveling alone. Müller's arrest in Frankfurt led to the discovery of a sophisticated operation that used fake journalists, researchers, and travel guides to approach potential victims, gather information about their travel plans and family connections, and then coordinate their abduction at locations where they would be least likely to be immediately missed. The investigation revealed that Margaret had been specifically targeted because her solo travel status and limited contact with family during her trip made her an ideal victim for the trafficking network, which preferred to take people who would not be immediately reported missing and whose disappearances could be attributed to travel accidents or voluntary disappearance. Under interrogation, Müller confessed to his role in Margaret's abduction, but claimed that she had been turned over to other members of the organization and that he did not know her ultimate fate, though he provided information that led to the arrest of 12 other individuals involved in the trafficking network. The investigation expanded across multiple countries as authorities traced the network's operations, leading to raids on safe houses in Germany, France, and the Netherlands, where other victims were rescued and evidence of the organization's activities was recovered. Tragically, the investigation confirmed that Margaret had not survived her ordeal, with Müller eventually leading authorities to a remote location in the Belgian countryside where her remains were discovered, bringing closure to her family after 4 years of uncertainty, but also confirming their worst fears about her fate. The prosecution of the trafficking network resulted in convictions for all 13 arrested individuals, with sentences ranging from 15 years to life in prison, and the dismantling of an operation that had been responsible for the disappearances of at least 47 people across Europe. Margaret's case became a landmark in international cooperation against human trafficking, with the evidence she had gathered and hidden in her suitcase providing the foundation for new protocols and investigative techniques that would be used to combat similar criminal organizations in the future. The resolution of Margaret Thompson's case had profound implications for tourist safety and international law enforcement cooperation, leading to significant changes in how authorities across Europe handle missing person cases involving foreign travelers. The Belgian government implemented new requirements for hotels and transportation companies to maintain detailed records of tourist movements and to report immediately when guests or passengers fail to appear at scheduled destinations, creating an early warning system that could help prevent similar tragedies. Margaret's parents, Harold and Dorothy Thompson, used the settlement they received from the Belgian government to establish the Margaret Thompson Foundation, which provides resources and support for families of missing tourists and funds research into improving safety measures for solo travelers. The foundation also works with law enforcement agencies to provide training on recognizing and investigating human trafficking cases, using Margaret's story as a case study in how seemingly isolated disappearances can be connected to larger criminal networks. The European Union adopted new legislation requiring member countries to share information about missing tourists immediately and to coordinate investigations across borders, eliminating the delays and jurisdictional issues that had hampered the initial investigation into Margaret's disappearance. Travel safety organizations incorporated Margaret's case into their educational materials, teaching solo travelers how to recognize potential threats and maintain security while exploring foreign countries, with particular emphasis on the importance of staying in regular contact with family and friends. The railway authorities across Europe implemented improved surveillance systems and security protocols at major train stations, ensuring that the kind of surveillance gaps that had allowed Margaret's abduction to go unrecorded could not happen again. Margaret's diary and the evidence she had compiled were used to train law enforcement officers in recognizing the tactics used by human traffickers to target tourists, helping to prevent other potential victims from falling prey to similar schemes. The case also led to improved cooperation between tourism industries and law enforcement, with hotels, transportation companies, and travel agencies receiving training on how to identify and report suspicious behavior that might indicate trafficking activities. An annual conference on tourist safety and human trafficking prevention was established in Margaret's memory, bringing together law enforcement officials, tourism industry representatives, and victim advocacy groups to share information and develop new strategies for protecting travelers. The legacy of Margaret Thompson's case continues to influence international efforts to combat human trafficking and protect vulnerable travelers, with her story serving as both a tragic reminder of the dangers that can face tourists and an inspiration for the ongoing fight against criminal organizations that prey on the innocent. The investigative techniques developed during the search for Margaret, particularly the analysis of travel patterns and the coordination of information across multiple jurisdictions, have been adopted by law enforcement agencies worldwide and have contributed to the successful resolution of hundreds of other missing person cases. The Margaret Thompson Foundation has grown into an international organization that operates in 15 countries, providing support services for families of missing tourists and funding research into improving safety measures and investigative techniques for cases involving international travel. The Foundation's annual report documents the impact of Margaret's case on tourist safety, noting that the protocols and systems established in response to her disappearance have helped prevent an estimated 200 potential trafficking cases and have contributed to the rescue of over 300 victims of human trafficking across Europe. Margaret's parents, now in their 80s, continue to be active in the Foundation's work, speaking at conferences and working with policymakers to ensure that the lessons learned from their daughter's case are not forgotten, and that other families do not have to endure the uncertainty and pain they experienced. The red leather suitcase that contained the evidence crucial to solving Margaret's case is now displayed at the International Museum of Crime and Punishment in Brussels, serving as a powerful symbol of how victims can contribute to their own justice even in death, and inspiring visitors to remain vigilant about the ongoing threat of human trafficking. Educational programs based on Margaret's case are taught in schools across Europe, helping young people understand the importance of travel safety and the reality of human trafficking, while also honoring the memory of a woman whose courage and foresight helped bring down a criminal network that had destroyed many lives. The annual Margaret Thompson Memorial Lecture, delivered at universities and law enforcement academies across Europe, continues to educate new generations of investigators, policymakers, and advocates about the importance of international cooperation in combating human trafficking and protecting vulnerable populations. Research funded by the Margaret Thompson Foundation has led to the development of new technologies for tracking missing persons and improved methods for identifying potential trafficking victims, ensuring that Margaret's legacy continues to save lives and bring criminals to justice decades after her tragic death. 25 years after Margaret Thompson's disappearance, her case remains a touchstone for discussions about tourist safety, human trafficking, and the importance of never giving up hope in the search for missing loved ones. The investigative methods pioneered during the search for Margaret have been refined and expanded, with modern technology allowing for even more sophisticated tracking and analysis of travel patterns that can help identify potential trafficking operations before they can claim victims. The Margaret Thompson Foundation has established partnerships with major technology companies to develop mobile applications and digital platforms that help travelers maintain contact with family and friends, while also providing resources for recognizing and reporting suspicious behavior. Law enforcement agencies across Europe continue to use Margaret's case as a training example, with new officers learning about the importance of thorough investigation, international cooperation, and the value of evidence that victims themselves may have gathered and preserved. The Foundation's scholarship program has provided educational opportunities for hundreds of young people who have gone on to careers in law enforcement, victim advocacy, and international relations, carrying forward Margaret's legacy of courage and determination in their professional lives. Margaret's story has been featured in numerous books, documentaries, and academic studies that examine the evolution of human trafficking and the development of international law enforcement cooperation, ensuring that her case continues to educate and inspire new generations of advocates and investigators. The protocols and systems established in response to Margaret's case have been adopted by countries around the world, with the United Nations citing her case as a model for how individual tragedies can catalyze systemic changes that protect vulnerable populations globally. The annual conference established in Margaret's memory has grown into one of the premier international forums for discussing tourist safety and human trafficking prevention, attracting participants from over 50 countries and generating research and policy recommendations that influence legislation and law enforcement practices worldwide. Harold and Dorothy Thompson, though now elderly, continue to attend the conference each year, where they are honored for their tireless advocacy and their role in transforming their personal tragedy into a force for positive change that has saved countless lives and brought justice to many victims of human trafficking. The impact of Margaret Thompson's case extends far beyond the immediate changes it prompted in law enforcement and tourist safety, serving as a catalyst for broader social awareness about the realities of human trafficking and the vulnerability of travelers in an increasingly connected but still dangerous world. Educational institutions across Europe have incorporated Margaret's story into their curricula, using her case to teach students about personal safety, the importance of maintaining communication while traveling, and the broader social issues surrounding human trafficking and exploitation. The case has inspired numerous works of fiction and non-fiction that explore themes of vulnerability, courage, and the power of individual action to effect change. With Margaret's story resonating with readers who see in her both a cautionary tale and an example of how ordinary people can make extraordinary contributions to justice. Social media campaigns and awareness initiatives continue to use Margaret's story to educate young travelers about safety precautions and to encourage reporting of suspicious behavior, with her photograph and story reaching millions of people who might otherwise be unaware of the risks associated with solo travel. The Margaret Thompson Foundation's research initiatives have contributed to academic understanding of human trafficking patterns and prevention strategies, with foundation-funded studies being cited in policy documents and legislative proposals around the world. Mental health professionals have studied Margaret's case to better understand the psychological impact of uncertainty on families of missing persons, leading to improved support services and counseling approaches that help families cope with the unique challenges of not knowing their loved one's fate. The case has also influenced the development of international legal frameworks for addressing human trafficking, with Margaret's story being cited in United Nations documents and international treaties that establish standards for investigating and prosecuting trafficking crimes. Travel insurance companies have revised their policies and procedures based on lessons learned from Margaret's case, offering enhanced coverage and support services for travelers who find themselves in dangerous situations abroad. The tourism industry has embraced Margaret's legacy through improved safety training for staff, better coordination with law enforcement agencies, and enhanced protocols for monitoring guest welfare and reporting suspicious activities. Today, more than 3 decades after Margaret Thompson's disappearance from Brussels Central Station, her legacy continues to protect travelers around the world and inspire those who work to combat human trafficking and support families of missing persons. The train station where she vanished has been renovated and now features a memorial plaque dedicated to Margaret and other victims of human trafficking, serving as a reminder to travelers and railway staff alike of the importance of vigilance and community protection. The Margaret Thompson Foundation operates programs in over 30 countries, providing direct assistance to families of missing tourists, funding research into trafficking prevention, and supporting law enforcement training initiatives that have helped solve thousands of cases and prevent countless tragedies. Her parents' tireless advocacy transformed their personal grief into a global movement that has fundamentally changed how the international community responds to missing person cases and human trafficking, demonstrating the power of love and determination to create lasting positive change. The red leather suitcase that contained the evidence crucial to solving her case has become an iconic symbol of hope for families of missing persons, representing the possibility that answers may still be found even when cases seem hopeless, and that victims themselves may have provided the keys to their own justice. Margaret's story continues to be told in schools, universities, and training academies around the world, educating new generations about the realities of human trafficking, while honoring the memory of a young woman whose courage and foresight helped bring down a criminal network and save countless lives. The investigative techniques and international cooperation protocols developed in response to her case have become standard practice in law enforcement agencies worldwide, ensuring that her legacy continues to protect vulnerable travelers and help solve missing person cases decades after her death. The annual Margaret Thompson Memorial Conference has evolved into a premier international forum for addressing human trafficking and tourist safety, bringing together experts, advocates, and policymakers who continue to build upon the foundation established by her tragic case. Her diary entries and photographs, preserved in the archives of the Margaret Thompson Foundation, serve as powerful testimony to the importance of documentation and awareness in protecting oneself and others from criminal exploitation. Margaret Thompson's story reminds us that even in the darkest circumstances, individual courage and preparation can make a difference, and that the love and determination of those left behind can transform personal tragedy into lasting change that protects and empowers others facing similar dangers. Her legacy lives on in every missing person case that is solved more quickly because of improved protocols, every potential trafficking victim who is saved by enhanced awareness and prevention measures, and every family that finds support and hope through the foundation that bears her name and continues her fight for justice and protection for all travelers.